Perfect timing.
Somebody's alarm was going off the other night. I was trying to sleep. And
Perfect timing for the car alarm. Well,
At least it's like
I
a
don't think
fire
it's
alarm.
actually picking it up. It
we'll
doesn't
power
look
through
like
it here. I bet you it's picking it up. Maybe. Subtly. Well, welcome to the podcast, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yep. Thank you for humoring me. Thank you for coming. This is the first in-person recording here in the new studio. So maybe some of the listeners have seen this perspective already. I've done some YouTube videos in here, but yeah, first time with visitors. So that's pretty cool. Kind of the idea of setting it up, doing this whole studio build out. See the linked video up here. I'm just kidding, I never did a video. But it's the purpose of once Ethan moved out, I was like, perfect. Studio. This is now my studio. So can't see in frame, but over here I have 2 desks put together, and over there I have like a nice corner cushy chair that's like half the size of the room. But yeah, it's good to be here. This is a Sibling episode. So Autumn has been on the podcast one time before, actually twice before technically, because we did a road trip edition.
Oh, I forgot you weren't there.
I didn't get to go
Our
on that,
trip to
unfortunately.
Colorado. Shout out to our Dimmock family. I don't know if they listen, but if they do,
We like to think they do.
Yeah, I like to believe. I usually might shout out to my aunt Joanne. We love you.
Love you, Aunt Joe.
Love you, Aunt
I know
Joe.
she listens, but she's usually like 3 months behind. Kind of like her Christmas gifts. Just kidding. Hopefully we'll edit that out. Just kidding. But because she sent me a message the other day about listening to my episode with Javi.
Wasn't that over
which
the
has
summer?
been a minute ago. Yeah. But hey, at least they're listening. Better late than never. And that's the nice thing about podcasts is it's there forever. So today we're going to, we don't really have a specific topic necessarily, but we have a couple of fun questions, and then we might get a little more serious as we go along. I should have brought my coffee bag in here to feature it, but we're each drinking some Ethiopia natural, I think it's like a Keisha or something.
I don't know.
Something like that, but real tasty. And that brings me to our sponsor for today's video, Olympia Coffee Roasting Company. Shout out to you guys. Thank you for sponsoring, giving us the juice to make it through this recording. So thank you, Olympia Coffee Roasting.
Appreciate it.
Yep. We accept espresso machines and coffee beans as payment. So yes, for all the publicity you're going to get from this podcast. So if you're in the Olympia area, and I think they have some throughout the Washington state, but especially Olympia, check them out. One of my favorite coffee shops in the state. Which brings me to my first question. Because this is the flow podcast, a lot of times that flow kind of goes into coffee stuff because that's just part of the flow. All apostolic people that are true apostolics drink good coffee. So that's
Be careful with that.
trigger warning. But and everyone with their Starbucks. Oh, I drink good coffee. But anywho, so first question for you guys is, and I think I asked Autumn this question the last podcast, but maybe she has a new answer. We'll start with Ethan, which, by the way, introducing my guests. Like I said, sibling episode. You've seen Autumn before. This is Ethan, little brother, and glad to have them here. So first question, what is your, at least current, favorite coffee shop?
Right now, it's in Daba, which just opened up, like, I don't know, a few months ago. I mean, not even a long time. But been going there a lot because it's good. It's really nice inside, too. Like, compared to some of the other coffee shops that are in older buildings, like, they're really...
It's nice
They
and
can,
clean.
they can feel a little dingy in some of the other places, and so this one you walk in, it's minimal, like white floor-to-ceiling windows. It's just like you feel so refreshed getting to go in there. So that's been my go-to, like twice a week right now. So and helps me get through Wednesdays So
that one's based in, I think, Spokane.
yeah.
So if you're in Washington State, check them out. Spokane, and I think they have a location in the Tri-Cities. And Yakima now.
Yeah.
We're getting on the map. Autumn, what do you
Right now.
could be favorite in the nation
Favorite
or the
in
world?
the nation or the world. Yeah, I was gonna say. I feel like last time I said that one we went to in London.
Oh yeah.
That was cool. But favorite, I don't know.
You probably go to the least out of all of us to,
Yeah, I don't.
to actual coffee shops.
I haven't been going out for coffee a lot lately. I'll just throw out a random one then. I really love Temple in Sacramento. Specifically
good
the one
one.
on K Street.
Yeah.
That one's really good.
Penny floors.
Yeah,
That one's
really cool interior too, which is always nice if you're like gonna sit there and like hang out for a while.
Yeah. Get some
Really good.
photos.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that we got the coffee portion of the episode out of the way, we fulfilled our contractual obligations to my sponsors. The three of us have been in church for our whole lives. And I was talking to the youth the other night about Samuel, and I kind of made a joke how, we say that we're raised in church, but Samuel literally was raised in church because his mom dedicated him and grew up in the house of the Lord. But we've been raised in church, as the saying goes, and so we've had our fair share of potlucks or picnic dinners, especially spending some time in the South, Arkansas. Get your fair share of potlucks. So do any of you guys either have a favorite potluck dish or favorite potluck memory, or both?
Goodness. I will say, even though potlucks here are totally different than the South,
Completely different.
like, I just specifically remember enchiladas from one a few years ago, and taking the leftovers home, and they were even better leftover. So
That's funny.
the enchiladas are
Yeah.
probably up there. But
Yeah, I feel like Ethan mentioned, potlucks here are so different than maybe what people would think. And so
Yeah.
it's always just like a random smorgasbord of stuff.
Yeah, you don't have like 10 dozen deviled eggs.
Yeah, it's not
here
like all the same
necessarily.
stuff and then a lot of the people that we go to church with, they didn't grow up in church and so they don't, not that they don't know what to bring or whatever, but it's just not something they grew up with.
Yeah.
And so they just bring whatever they want, which is great. I don't know if I have a favorite dish. Something that comes to mind is, it's not really a potluck, but like in the summer, we always, we'll go to the park and stuff. Mm-hmm. And we'll just like tell people like, oh yeah, some of us are going to the park, and a bunch of people from church will just show up. And one of the ladies from church almost always brings a batch of ceviche.
Ceviche, yep.
So shout out to Sister Mary for her ceviche because it's so good.
she's the one who made the enchiladas too. By the way.
Yeah, shout out
I'll
to
just throw that
Sister
out there.
Mary. She
Sister
just
Mary,
always
we love you,
comes
so
through.
That's funny.
Appreciate the food.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's not to say people in the South don't have Hispanics in their churches, but that's kind of one of the
That's
differences.
more predominant here.
Yeah, if I remember right too, when we first had a quote unquote potluck here, I feel like people were like, "What is that? Like,
Yeah.
what is a potluck?" Because it's I guess even just the term is
Just the
not,
culture is
a
different.
usual thing. But I'll share a favorite. Well, I don't know if it's a favorite memory, but a potluck memory. Throwing it back to Arkansas.
See, I don't even
days.
remember any potlucks from
I guess
when we were there,
this is
but
one of those
maybe.
I remember from like being told it. Just
I know what you're
the
saying.
oral
That's okay.
tradition of sharing the story of this
I feel like I
wonderful cat lady.
Oh my word, yeah, I saw that coming.
Who there's always most likely, if you've been in church a long time, there's always that person
There's some
who brings
questionable
that
food.
dish
Mhm.
that they don't even know what to call it.
Yeah, there's some questions.
And so, yeah, just looking at him, it's like, okay, this is a little suspect. And some people, it's like, if you're brave and you try it, then kudos to you. But this lady would bring deviled eggs, and she had a ton of cats. And so, I feel like
It
she
was
baked
evident.
some of her cats in the deviled eggs.
Yeah.
And so, that was the benefit,
That's what it
though.
seemed like. She didn't actually do that,
Yeah.
but
That was the
You
benefit,
knew she
though.
had cats.
Right. Yeah, and no one wanted a fuzzy deviled egg.
Ew.
So I think what's funny is like thankfully a ton of people would bring deviled eggs, and so the ladies in the kitchen managing the food and putting it out, sneakily put that one aside. And of course she came in though and was like, "Oh, where's my deviled eggs?" And so someone, I think it was actually our mom, without lying, said, "Oh, they went so fast, sister.
They went quick.
Man, they went quick, and now we just have these other ones." And they did go quick into the trash because we're going to serve.
Funny.
But hopefully that dear sister in the Lord is not a listener. If you are, Lord bless you and your kitties.
For your contribution.
Yeah. Oh, man. But
That's
I feel
funny.
like, we all have different giftings and callings. Some people's gifting is not potluck dishes. So,
Bring drinks.
yeah, exactly. That's always safe. Drinks. Or
funny.
a store-bought dessert.
Yeah.
That's my go-to.
Yeah.
Let's get her out. So, okay, so this is going to be kind of random, some questions here. So number 2, I will say this excludes, because this should be everyone's question, this is going to exclude Jesus as your
You're
answer.
gonna say that.
But if you could have any Bible character as a ministry partner today, imagine yourself as one of the disciples, but today, and your pastor says, "All right, I'm sending you out 2 by 2, and you could choose any Bible character as your ministry partner. Who would it be and why?"
Tough.
It is a hard one.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like a pretty easy one to say would just be Paul, because
That's what I was thinking.
he's got that boldness and authority, and that place with the churches where you can kind of, as terrible as it sounds, like, you don't even have to do much. Like, just if you're just with Paul, like, he, it's gonna be good.
Yeah.
But,
Be the silent Silas.
yeah. I mean, I think obviously anybody's gonna be.
Yeah. That was my first instinct too, was to say Paul.
Yeah.
I feel like he would drop me so quick though and be like,
Drop you.
yeah, like, I want a new partner.
Like
Because you
Mark.
read about these people in the Bible, they're just like they come across like they're just so fearless and they just know what they're called to do and just do it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I
for
think
me, just for experience purposes, like, I would want to have like Elisha, or either Elisha or Elijah, like, is my, I know it's
That's
a
a
whole
good
different
answer.
testament, and
Yeah.
but they were still in ministry, and prophets of God, and just some of my favorite stories are those guys and their ministry, and just seems like another level that we don't necessarily see firsthand today. That would be really cool to be with those guys.
Yeah.
So,
Well, like you said, the Old Testament's totally
Completely
different. So you're
right.
it's a completely different type of ministry too.
Mhm.
So
Which, I mean, I think, and that's where I think, though, that, like, with the prophet, I think that it's a different type of ministry and a different testament, but I think it's still, much of it would still carry over, and it's still, like, needed and could be, obviously, it'd be useful today, too. Like, we still need and have prophets, and so, yeah, that would be some cool ones. But, okay, so we'll keep it a little bit lighter hearted here for the first couple, get us going. So Ethan, this one might be, well, it'll be kind of 2-part because it might be more directed at you for the second part. But first part, do you guys have a favorite song, a go-to song that you just have on repeat at the moment?
It's funny because
You go first.
you're involved in the music ministry, but I feel like Joey and I listen to a lot more music
Yeah.
outside of church.
yeah,
But
I don't really. Like, I'm never the one who finds a new song and sends it to you guys. Like,
We always
it's always
send
you
it
guys
to you.
sending me the songs, and I kind of stick to the same artists. And like, you sent one last year by Eddie James, that I've Been Washed, and I was listening to that one a ton. And it's unfortunate because then they kind of get lost in your playlist too.
Yeah.
And so you listen to them a bunch, and like, probably could still be listening to that one a lot. But
Which one did you say?
I've Been Washed by
Oh,
The
I've been
first of those ones that
yeah,
you
by
came out
Eddie
with.
James.
Yeah.
I really like Believe for It.
Yeah, I was gonna say that
Yeah.
that whole album, honestly.
Is it by CC
CC
Winans?
Winans.
Yeah.
That one's
That whole album is what I've been
liking
listening to
no
nonstop.
greater.
I was gonna say that. That's probably my favorite from the album. No Greater or I've Got Joy. That one's
Yeah.
really good too.
CC Winans, Believe for It is actually the name of the album.
Yeah.
If you
But
haven't heard it.
specifically the song on that album that I like too. Believe
Yeah.
for It.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all really good.
Yeah. Yeah, if you haven't heard it, wake up. No. So my go-to, this one, I don't think I've sent this to you guys. It's kind of more of a, I don't know, not necessarily CCM. I don't know what you'd call it, but I'm going to play a little clip from it just because I can. So this one is called Yours to Use by Aaron Cole featuring Jonathan McReynolds.
To be honest, faith feels like free falling into darkness, not knowing what's
Good driving song.
behind the edges, questions, pressure, intention. So I'm trusting you. If what's breaking me is what's saving me, and my
Just give you guys a little teaser. Yeah, I really like that one. That's a recent find I've been enjoying. But okay, so second part of this question is for Ethan because you lead the music there in Sela. So do you have a favorite current go-to song to worship with?
Autumn might even know this when I say it because it's Believe for It. Again, that's
Oh,
why.
yeah.
Is because I feel like it's so applicable in a lot of the situations. And so I find myself just, during altar call, like that's what I go up and I start singing and
Yeah, we've been doing that one.
yeah, and I'm
That's
a
so
little
good, though,
self-conscious
yeah.
about it sometimes because it's like, wait, I think I just did this one
Yeah.
last week or I don't know if we've ever actually done it as the whole praise team. I think it's only been
Like an altar call.
either altar call or me just doing a solo song.
Yeah.
And so I love that song and
That's good.
it's so true. So
That's a good
that's
one.
why. But,
Good recommendations.
yeah.
Okay, so a second area for recommendation, which this one may be more autumn, is are you reading, or which maybe we'll start with just, are you reading any
This guy.
current books at the moment?
I'm reading books.
Ethan, what are you reading at the moment?
I'm reading When Ye Fast by Joy Haney.
Oh, that's good.
And I just
book,
finished a
good
book
book.
too. Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
I know.
What'd you just finish?
I just finished The Nautical Hour by Brother Tony Bailey. So
Both
Good
good.
one.
Very good. I don't know if this counts, but I'm listening to on audiobook Atomic Habits by James Clear, which has been really good. I really, really like it. And then
The Apostolic.
he's not, but, take the meat, throw away the bone.
Not yet. He's not yet.
Not yet. So I've been listening to that on audiobook just like during my workday. And then I'm reading In Search of Holiness by David and Loretta Bernard. That's his mom.
Oh.
Yeah, him and his mom wrote it together, which is really cool.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool. I just finished actually When You Fast too.
okay.
I just read that one last month.
Yeah, I just
I
read
started it last month. But
Yeah, honestly, it took me
I read
a
it.
lot longer than it should have because it's only right
It's
at 100
short,
pages.
yeah.
But yeah, I just because I'll usually be reading at least 3 books, but because I just recently finally found the whole Lord of the Rings in a trilogy, so it's like each book is like 600 plus pages because it's like 2 or 3 books in one. So I started that, but I haven't been reading that too much. But then there's this other book. Should have brought it in here with me. I'm excited to get into because it's actually about history of revivals in Washington.
Oh, wow.
And Puyallup even specifically.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, I can't remember what it's called now. But yeah, Loren just gave me that one the other day from the church to borrow. So I'm excited. Just flipping through it, there's a couple points where you're having revivals in Puyallup, which is where one of our congregations is in the state. And there was a meeting with like 1,500 people,
Wow.
you know, and so yeah, I'm excited just to read that to stir up some things
That's cool.
in me and faith and believing for it.
Is
And
it like just Puyallup or is it's all of
I
Washington?
think it's a lot of Washington, but it's like
A lot of
specific
it
to
started in
Puyallup.
Puyallup, kind
Yeah,
of.
the
Do you remember
guy
what it's
and
called?
I can't remember what it's like. Abides. I cannot remember what it's called. Yeah, I'll have to get it and plug it at the end or get it and cut it. Anyway, so okay, so outside of those books that you're currently reading, do you guys have any books that you would recommend to the listeners?
Yeah, this is an autumn question.
Yeah. Any books? I know it's still the beginning of the year. I don't know what your book rate is, but if you have any books from last year, your go-to book, top book from last year, you'd recommend?
I did not read a lot last year. I'm trying to do better this year and like tracking my reading, which I feel like is helping me
Yeah.
because I like to see my progress, you know. But we all mentioned we just currently are reading or just finished reading Sister Haney's book, When You Fast, which I would definitely recommend. And then she also has one called When You Pray, which I would definitely recommend. I want to reread that soon. There's so many. I don't know.
Those are good ones. Good
Yeah.
ones.
I'm trying to think, like,
Everyone needs to be praying and fasting.
everyone needs to be reading fast.
Amen.
She also has one, I haven't read it yet, but I mean, I'm sure it's good. But she also has one called When You Give, which I
Yeah, no
really
one
want to
wants
read.
that one.
Yeah.
I've never even heard of that one, I'll be honest.
Yeah. It's not the most popular of the three.
Yeah.
No, I like I said, I haven't read it yet, but I think I own it, so I want to read that.
Gift of giving.
Yeah. What else? Yeah, anything by Sister Haney. I have a bunch of hers because we started a church bookstore, and so we got a bunch of her books that we're selling, and so I've recently acquired a bunch of hers that are still on my to read list. So that's kind of at the forefront of my mind. But yeah,
Those are good ones. Good recommendations. Okay. So, moving into kind of we'll call it the second half or portion of this episode. Maybe some more serious questions, topics. So, for those of you who haven't listened, I would recommend going back and listening to my episode with Autumn. It was really good talking about just kind of the journey of life and, trusting in the Lord. And, but as I mentioned, like, each of us have grown up in church and, in a lot of ways by default have been involved in ministry. And I think for each of us, I mean, I think there's for sure been individual buy-in, pretty early on. I wouldn't say that there was a long period of us doing it only out of obligation. I think thankfully became real for us all pretty quick, especially in days in Wapato and the church basement and serving the homeless and just the real raw ministry that we were part of there in the lower valley of Washington. And this can be related to anything, could be related to even just being children of ministry or whatever kind of it fits in for you guys. But what are some of the most challenging aspects? Because now also you guys are all involved in ministry yourselves too. Now it's moved in many ways beyond the expected and obligatory into the, I guess you could say stepping more into the individual callings. So what are some of the most challenging aspects of ministry that you've faced up to this point or feel like that you faced, and how do you navigate them?
Go first on this one? You want me
you
to?
can go first on this one.
And feel free to, as you answer, to kind of describe your ministry involvement in different areas.
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously growing up, we weren't ever necessarily in a big church, we, when we were in Arkansas, we were, but for the last 12 years and a few years prior to that, we were just doing everything, and I've noticed some of these areas like that need filled, that stepping into those roles that need filled. And I think the most challenging thing has been finding that balance of, okay, like I need to help fill this role because I recognize that it's needed, but also still recognizing that it is ministry and not letting it just be obligatory. Like you said, it has to become our own. And, I think that obviously we're going to have to push through that sometimes. We have our specific callings, but you have to get to that point where you realize, okay, this is more than just filling a role, but the Lord will still use it.
Right.
So that's what I've noticed a lot. That,
finding the balance.
Difficult to push through at times, but still necessary.
Yeah.
I think one of the probably biggest challenges I've faced is comparison, and realizing, obviously God has made us all different and given us all, you mentioned this earlier on a less serious note, but he's given us all specific gifts and talents and callings.
Right.
And so just knowing like, okay, God has called me to something different. You can't compare situations, even people that may be doing something similar to what you're doing, just not comparing, because like you might be in you're dealing with different people, or, there's so many different factors. And so, just, I think the way that you deal with that, you just have to remind yourself that like God uses our struggles, even, and he uses our inadequacies, and to rely on him. And so just, not looking at other people and what everyone else is doing.
Yeah. That's a good one. And how would you say, like, I guess even for both of you, because of, whether it's comparison or, knowing, okay, this is a role I should fill, or this is one I should kind of let someone else, or even help someone else, facilitate someone else filling. How have you, I guess, kept the right perspective and the right, I'll even say like motive and attitude throughout your lives, being involved in ministry and in kingdom work, because I guess I kind of asked this question to you guys in a coming from a place of just admiration, because we see a lot of cases where there's people who seem like they had the great situations and pastors' kids and ministry families, but what it seemed like a bitterness or something came in them, and it caused a resentment towards the church and towards the Lord and towards ministry. So how would you guys say you've kept that balance and things in perspective?
Honestly, I feel like I have to give the credit to mom and dad. They've just been so good about our whole lives, teaching us the importance of ministry and just being really honest with us. And so, I can't tell you the amount of times I've had conversations with dad about struggling in certain areas and certain roles that I was in that that felt maybe like I was just filling a role, and just the way that he's handled it and how he's taught us. And obviously the scripture talks about this doesn't even compare to sufferings as the scripture talks about, but
right.
That's the verse I think of. The sufferings of this present time aren't worthy to be compared to the glory that's before us. And so it's like nothing that's going on right now that may seem difficult or challenging, like it's all going to be worth it. So I think that's a big deal.
I think I'd go off of what Ethan said in that, I never felt like there was an obligation, really. Mom and dad, again, like Ethan said, they were always very open and honest with us about everything that ministry entailed, and, stuff that they were going through and facing, and, within the church. And, and so we felt all of that and went through all of it together.
Yeah.
And so it gave us a love for the ministry. it wasn't ever an obligation to just do something. And I mean, these things, like offenses and stuff that you talked about, it definitely tries to come up. It's definitely stuff that we have to, pray against and work through.
Right.
I think just reminding ourselves why we're doing what we're doing. We're not doing it, to please our dad or to, for any reason, like for any human reason. I think just reminding yourself why you're doing what you're doing, just keeping that perspective.
Yeah, that's true. I think of it, and it's funny because it came up last time in our episode, Autumn, with talking about just the element of submission. And I think that is really crucial to this. I mean, because, you're not always going to agree with what those that are asking you to do things are asking you to do, and or how they're doing it. And but I think just keeping that, open line of communication as well is really important, that I think everyone could do better at, just whether it's with your pastor, or because it's just becomes too easy to talk about the ministry and to talk about the saints and different things, and for me in my current like position, and I guess just like state of ministry, it's an area that I've had to be aware of probably even more than ever before. Even growing up as a pastor's kid at times, it's a different place, and I find myself realizing like, well, the people of God are the bride of Christ, and so if I ever am talking bad about them, like I'm talking bad about God's bride. And I think that's something that growing up with, like, I can't remember a time where our parents ever talked bad about people in the church. Sure, there were certain times where there were situations that we knew about, but most of it was like, some of it was very major, like mistakes and things people made, but even then, like, they never were talking about it in a demeaning type of way of the people, and it was always in a building up and supporting, and so I think for me that's helped a lot too, seeing that example. So yeah.
I mean, something that's so easy to misunderstand is a lot of times in ministry, like I think people can expect something, when they're ministering, like they're expecting, like they're, to be recognized, maybe, I don't know. But the perspective to have is like, when you're in ministry, you're serving the body, right? That's what you're doing the whole time, is you're serving them. You're not up on the platform or ministering or singing because you're special and they're looking to you. You're really serving them, and that perspective is I think what you have to keep at all times, because that'll humble you really quick if you remember that all the time, that you're there for the body.
I think it's true. In the same way that he, gave himself for us, we're doing it, and then too, not doing it for like approval or recognition, kind of like you said, like, but we're doing it, giving ourselves, as he did, in a denial of self type of way, and so which kind of brings me to another topic I want to talk about is just that, like, the denying of ourselves, and first of all, like, passing it, Ethan, kind of to you, like we had talked about with what that thing the Lord's been talking to you about recently of idols, and you just recently did a little video about it, but I'll just let you sort of give a summary of that, and then we'll sort of kick it back. And
I feel like that video was my summary. The video was the short version. But
well, if you want, we can just insert that right here. Pause for 3 minutes, and I'm just kidding.
No, I basically, the Lord was just talking to me about, do I have any idols in my life, and from a perspective of not not this little golden statue like we think of when we think of an idol,
Right.
but just anything that has priority over God. And growing up, I mentioned this in the video that growing up we were told anything before God is an idol, and I took that to the literal sense. And I of course later realized that's didn't mean when you wake up in the morning you can't do anything else before you pray, but the Lord just let me realize like anything I'm not willing to give up for Him is an idol.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty bold statement to say that. If I'm saying that, if I'm holding on to something that He's asking me to give up, I'm basically telling God that this thing is more important than He is.
Right.
But it's true though. If we're not willing to give something up that's a detriment to our relationship with God, and we're not willing to obey Him, then we're saying that this thing we're being disobedient in is more important than Him, and it's an idol.
Yeah.
And it was cool this morning at men's prayer. One of the guys closed out prayer and shared a little bit, and he referenced something about sort of serving yourself and doing stuff for yourself, and he said that you can be an idol to yourself.
Wow.
He's
Yeah.
like, if everything you do is for yourself, then you're your own idol, and it should be getting our attention off of ourselves and being on God. So it was just cool how that tied into what the Lord's been talking to me about.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's so good. I've been thinking, and the reason I wanted to tie that in is because I've been thinking about, I feel like the Lord's been dealing with me about recently this huge problem that I have, which is self, and I believe it's the greatest hindrance that any human faces, more than the devil, more than anything. It's just ourself, and that desire to be self-seeking, or get self whatever, like just itself, anything you insert self into. And so the verse that's been on my mind, which when you talked about that, the idols, it made me think of this more too, because the verse that's been on my mind is Matthew, and it's throughout the Gospels too, Mark 8, Luke 9, but Matthew 16, Jesus tells his disciples that if any man will come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Because whoever will save his life shall lose it, and whoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it. And what's really been sticking out to me with this is that word deny. If you look at the meaning of that, one of the definitions for that word is to forget oneself and to lose sight of one's own self and one's own interests. And so I just feel like this is a huge area. And so when you talked about what you did, it really just bore witness with me, because of how I felt like the Lord's been dealing with me about self. And whether I'm the idol or just I'm myself, or whether it's my own interests, like the things that are in my sight, and my own interests that get in the way of ministry or a relationship with God, because it'll do both.
I was thinking about the scripture where it says, set aside every sin and wait. And I was
Yeah.
thinking about that this morning. And so I just thought I'd check wait in that scripture. And it says whatever is prominent.
Yeah.
And so it's just interesting that you set it aside, that would beset us, that would
Right.
knock us off the path that we're on and the race we're running.
Yeah. Prominent. And it's interesting too, because like you look at the Strong's definition of deny, and it's to disown or abstain from a thing. So it's like if something is prominent in our life and we realize, and that's, I think, a big thing that I think maybe a lot of our current culture doesn't do, is we're not honest with ourselves.
Yeah.
Like there's so much deception in the world, and even a lot of it kind of creeping into the church about, take care of yourself and have self-care days, which I'm not saying you shouldn't, have days for yourself to an extent.
Yeah.
You should have rest days, all those things, but at the same time, it's put so much of a focus on self that it said like, oh no, if there's anything that comes up that tries to say I should deny myself or, disown or abstain from anything that pleasing to me, then no, like that can't be right. And so I just feel like, and for especially our generation, like there's some things that if we could get a hold of as a younger generation, like it would just distinguish us so much from even the, kind of denominational church world that's so much about kind of gaining and, the smoke and the lights and the prosperity and all those things. So yeah, I think it's good.
So true.
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of been a theme that we've sort of been on like so far this year. Like we've talked a lot about fasting and consecration and just like in a lot of ways going back to a place of that maybe we had before of, establishing better fasting habits, I guess, if I can call it that. And then like I was having coffee with a friend the other day and she was talking about just praying like that God would keep her broken. And then on Thursday night during our midweek Bible study, one of the men that spoke was talking about brokenness as well and just like, staying broken. I think a lot of times we're like, okay, well, I'll go on a fast, I'll deny myself. But it's like
For a season.
Yeah, it's just for that time.
Yeah.
And then we come off of it and we go right back to giving ourselves whatever we want, know, but kind of staying in that place of brokenness and denial and definitely something I've got to work on, but I feel like God's definitely taking us there. It's been a theme,
Yeah.
It's unique because you fast like to deny yourself, and I believe like the Lord he'll bless you like when you fast and like you'll gain things from fasting. But there's been times where I'll fast and then I'll find myself denying myself, but then when I go to prayer, everything is seeking for myself. It's like, Lord, I need answers, help me. And I think you can fast like because you need answers. Like I believe that's a reason to fast. But it was a few months ago I was praying and it seemed like I wasn't getting answers for anything and just felt like, what would happen if I would just stop praying about myself, like stop praying about what my needs, and every time I go to prayer it is God, like what do you want, and praying for others like, every time. And in Proverbs, I don't know exactly where it is, it talks about how a man thinks in his heart or what he wants, and but God knows. He knows a man's heart. He knows what we need, and when you're focused on what you think you need, sometimes it stops the Lord from being able to do what he wants to do in you because you're focused on one area. But if you would just seek the Lord and pray for others and do things for others, like your life will be impacted by it and because of it. When you get the attention off yourself. So.
That's so true. So true. It makes me think of, which I probably even talked about it before on the podcast, but the concept that Brother Barnes would teach about consistent discipline and or you could even just say consistent denial, consistent self-denial. And because he talked about, like, yes, I'm sure he was an avid faster, but he talked about like how because of his life was habits and practices of consistent discipline, he could accomplish more in one day of fasting than many people could in 21 days. Because he was already every day denying himself certain things and saying no. That was kind of the big thing, is like every day finding something to be able to tell yourself no about. And that's kind of an area too, and I'm not just saying it about, it's easy to just say like, our generation or others, but even for myself, like that's a big thing. I realized that it's easy to not do. It's easy to just like, man, whatever I'm feeling, whatever I'm hungry for, whatever
Yeah.
whatever I want to entertain myself with, it's so easy to just do it because it's all just so accessible. And I think that accessibility of whether it's, Uber Eats or DoorDash or just, Netflix, like everything literally can be just brought to us and accessible within an instant. And so it takes, a higher level of self-discipline to say, even as accessible as these things are, I'm going to choose not to let myself like indulge in them. And I think a perspective within that the Lord's been dealing with me about is because it's hard, right? Because in order to do that, we have to be thinking about the long term. We have to be thinking
Yeah.
too also about like the eternal, because to deny ourselves right now is uncomfortable right now.
Yeah.
And we don't usually gain anything from doing it right now. But it's sowing things eternally, and it's causing us to spiritually be better down the road. But to have that perspective is also it means denying ourselves the instant gratification of things. So
That's so funny. I feel like, I mean, you pointed out earlier the Atomic Habits book I'm listening to. He's not an apostolic author, but there's
Yeah.
been so many things within that book.
Yeah.
He's talking about disciplines and habits that I'm like, man, you could preach this book.
yeah,
And a lot of that stuff in the recent chapters that I've been listening to, he was talking about, the long term. And, we don't develop good habits and disciplines because we want the instant gratification.
Yeah.
And like oftentimes the things that have, better long-term payoff don't usually have any instant gratification.
Right.
Like it takes time and discipline and anyways.
yeah,
I mean, it says, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And it talks about laying up treasures in heaven.
Yeah.
Obviously, heaven isn't right now.
It's not right now.
That's,
Exactly.
That's looking ahead. And
Yeah.
exactly.
We can't think so in the present.
Right. Well, and the scripture talks about too, like that the things that are eternal they're not seen. And so being able to have that ability, I think it's so interesting too. Like we see Jesus talking in John 3 to Nicodemus about, unless you're born of the water and spirit, you can't see the kingdom. And so it makes me realize like it's just all part of the flow. Like unless you're in the spirit and born of it, then you can't even, like, all these things are foolishness. And it's just more scriptures that talk about, right, the revealing of these things by the spirit, because naturally it doesn't make sense to give the first couple hours of your morning to the Lord. People are like, that's a waste, or it doesn't make sense to fast and lose weight and and go without eating and all these different things, like, because nobody can see. They don't even see what usually within yourself the what it is that's growing and being produced, but those in the spirit, they see it. And I think that's a powerful thing. Like, but it also makes me think of an interesting, like, because there are some external things that we do to separate ourselves that people do see, and they recognize, like, long hair, modesty, like those type of things, like people recognize. And then when we have, I believe when we have the spiritual aspect backing that up too, it all just works together, and it creates this like glow that whether people are spiritual or not, they see and they recognize, okay, I don't know what it is this person's doing, but something is different, and it makes sense in a way. So, yeah. Well, kind of wrapping things up here, I have some closing questions for you all. So, this might be a tough one, but so we'll pose it to both of you.
why am I nervous about this?
Is this one on the
I just don't know. I don't know. Yeah, the list you sent me is over, so we'll see what this is.
This is an impromptu question.
Oh.
So, this would be being a little honest with our audience.
Say when he starts laughing like this too.
So now after this conversation we just had, which was very good, challenging, talking about idols. Do you all feel like you have any idols? I'm just kidding.
What is this confession?
I'm just joking. Just kidding. No, that was a joke.
Do you actually have follow-up questions?
No,
or-
I don't really have a follow-up
That was
question.
a lot of build up.
So we'll close with this. And if you have nothing to say, then it's fine. We'll just fade to the music. But we're all pretty much essentially in the same generation, I guess. And a lot of times we think that it has to be like the older generation that speaks things to the younger generation, but I think we're seeing more and more in our generation people who the Lord's giving He's given an authority to, and because it's people that are hungry, that have done these things that we're talking about, and they've pursued God, they've sown things in the Spirit, and so there's young people who have a great spiritual authority that even the elders are having to recognize. And and I think it's only powerful too because those young people are submitted still. But I say all that to say, like, I think even your generation, there's coming a day, and I think we're in it now, even where things that you all speak and your examples like will be received by elders, and it'll also be received by your generation. Like it'll be you'll be speaking parallel but also upward and downward. So with that said, in closing, maybe I'll pose it as two parts of a question. For your saying, for your generation, is there anything that, first of all, anything that you think within your generation that could be worked on, that maybe we're lacking in as a generation, as a young people, in walk with the Lord, in relationship with God and the kingdom, that we could maybe focus on a little bit more? Anything comes to mind?
I think kind of like we already talked about, just the spiritual disciplines, like telling ourselves no and establishing, a life of prayer and fasting in the Word, and, just being disciplined in that area. I think a lot of times, we put emphasis on, like the flow of this Spirit and everything. And obviously we believe in that, but there's discipline and structure that's important too. I know that's an area that I personally need to work on. And I think, like you talked about, we have such easy access to everything these days. And, our generation especially has grown up with that. It's become the norm. So I think just denying ourselves, telling ourselves no, and being disciplined, big thing.
Yeah.
I would say, like, don't feel the pressure of what you think a ministry should look like. And when you do these things that Autumn just said about having discipline and prayer in the Word, is the Lord will lead you into what He wants you to be in ministry.
Yeah.
And too often we try and mimic what we've seen, these great preachers or these great singers, and I definitely think we can learn from them. I mean, the Bible is stories of men of God that we learn from, but I think the Lord is going to have to use you in the way He wants to use you, and we're not copying anybody. We're being who God wants us to be.
Yeah. So true.
So
That's so true, and that's so good, because I was gonna say pretty much the same thing, like about with social media especially, it's become a culture that's so focused on following trends and doing things that are, people pleasing is really a huge part of it. And it's like, okay, what is the current trend? So how should I do this so that it's accepted? And so the algorithm pushes my stuff and all this stuff. And I feel like it's caused a lot of us in our generation to not be genuine, to not even recognize who we are.
Right.
Because instead of focusing on who we are by getting face to face with God, we're on TikTok trying to go viral or
Help us,
whatever.
Lord.
Like, yeah. And I think it translates, and I think we can tell, and I'm not saying that social media completely is of the devil, because I think there's still benefits of it. I mean, I do it for my job, but for
Social
marketing
media
reasons.
manager.
But I think it shows why it is a tool that's used of the devil,
Yeah.
is because how it gets into the church, and people not having a boldness, not having a confidence, because they don't know who they are. They don't know who they are in God, because they've spent too much time trying to follow the trends, and they've spent too much time, trying to curate their page to look a certain way and to be received by people and to get X number of likes and have X number of followers to following ratio and all this stuff, and it's like, if we could just move past that desire to be seen and to please people, then I really believe that the Lord's going to increase the voices of people in our generation.
Yeah.
And then he's also going to then increase their influence because of not trying to find influence for influence sake. And so there's going to be, and I think it has to happen, a rising up of who we truly are in him. And that comes from what we're talking about, a denying of ourself, a getting alone with God, like Jacob on the mountain, and wrestling with the Lord until the day breaks, and saying, you know what, everyone else is over here, I'm up here by myself, but now's the time to find what my true identity is and get my name changed. And that's not going to come through social media. It's not going to come through the affirmation of men or people. And something I saw recently is, just in studying some of the prophets, I had the question of who ordains prophets and who makes prophets prophets. And you look in scripture and it's nobody does. It's the Lord that makes a person a prophet. And like with Samuel, he was dedicated by his mom. I'm trying to hurry up and get on this, but he's dedicated by his mom, and for the service, for the work of the Lord, he was consecrated, essentially set apart to it. And then said he didn't know the Lord. He didn't yet know the word of the Lord. He hadn't been revealed to him. But then as he grew, then it says that the Lord was with him and the Lord revealed himself to him. And it said he didn't let any of his words fall to the ground. And then it says that, and all the people of Israel knew that he was established as a prophet because of his words, because the power of his words, and because he grew into who he was and who he was supposed to be, because of learning who God was, and because of God being revealed to him. And I think we're too often, and I'm talking from experience, too often we and I have tried to get our affirmation and who we are, what we're supposed to be doing, from people and through social media and through all these different means. But the affirmation of who we are is going to come from the Lord. And then our gifts are going to make room for themselves. God is going to exalt us in due time as we humble ourselves, and all these things will just begin to work together. And we're going to see great things. So
The thing I've been hearing the last couple of weeks is you don't have to convince people of your ministry.
Right.
Like if you're walking in your ministry, they'll recognize it. And that example you just gave of Samuel, like when you're being obedient to God and walking in the anointing, you don't have to try and convince people of it. They'll recognize that. So.
I was kind of thinking something along those same lines too when you were talking earlier, and then when you mentioned just now, like the gifts will make room for themselves. Like I think a lot of times, especially, when we look at other people, there's a lot of pressure to like seek after a certain ministry, but it's like if we just put all of our time and energy into relationship with God, like those things will naturally come, like if we're walking with him, it's gonna come.
Absolutely. It's a good place to end. Fade to music.
And cut.